Why are we seeing more UCL injuries, and what do we do about it? Well, it's no shock to anybody that we've seen a rise in UCL injuries over the past few years, with the early specialization, as people like to kind of go down the rabbit hole, the year-round play that we see. But a big part that I don't think people think about is just the chasing and the want of these athletes to hit these higher and higher velocities. We're seeing more and more athletes throw 100 plus, 105 is a benchmark. We're trying to get up there. And we see these things, and we've seen a correlating increase in the UCL injuries. Actually, the median range of these injuries is around 17 years old. And then, below, I think it's below 20. I'll have to double check, but below 20 years of age, you see over 2/3, so 66.7-ish% of athletes getting surgery are actually 20 years and younger, which is crazy. So what are kind of the common causes of that, and how can we go about attacking these and getting better, or making sure we're on the right foot? So we see a peak in these UCL injuries in that April to May timeframe, and then in September, October. So at the beginning of the season, once we get back into throwing, if we don't have a proper ramp up period or a return to throw, especially for athletes who end up taking some time off, you just go back to vigorous throwing, high intensity, high volume, and that just puts a lot of stress overload, let alone our athletes who are younger, who have gone through a growth spurt before or since last season. And then, okay, now you've got 1.5, 2 inches more of arm that you have to control, and you're trying to do the same thing, but you haven't had time to develop that new pattern. You're just putting a lot of excess stress on the shoulder and the elbow and whatnot. And that's why we're seeing overload on the inside of the elbow, or that UCL stress. Another big one we see is towards the end of the season, so September, October. So I'll throw a couple studies up behind me in this video so you can kind of see these are where I'm pulling from. But because we start to see fatigue levels rise, you start to see, importance of games rise as you start hitting deeper and deeper into the playoffs, or whatever you want to say. It's like, okay, we're seeing fatigue level rise, we're seeing intensity rise, but try to match the same, but we can't maintain this here. So you're going to use more of these other tissues rather than the passive tissues, and you're going to overload them, try to muscle through and still get the same velocity if we're not able to hit these different things. In these studies that I threw up here, some of the big things that we want to kind of focus on going forward, one are a good lead in or a good ramp up, whether it be a return to throwing, or if you play year-round baseball, it's okay, let's take a little bit of time off, but let's not stop throwing altogether, and let's slowly increase the intensity as we get closer to the season. Another big one is maintaining our range of motion throughout the off season. So that's a big one as you kind of go through some of the studies, and I'll link everything in the captions or whatnot. That way you can kind of see where I'm pulling from. But as you go through, especially as you age, so as the younger the athlete, the more, we'll just call them, the more bouncy they are. You don't bounce as good as when you're older. But the older the athlete, the more important that recovery or that maintenance of shoulder range of motion, shoulder health, muscle strength, that kind of stuff is going to be as we go through the off season and into the season. Another big thing is proper throwing mechanics. You see it over and over and over again in the literature. If we don't have proper mechanics, we're going to overload certain things down the chain, and most of the time that's going to end up in the elbow, just because that carries a ton of the load once we're trying to throw that intensity further on down the season. So there's a couple other things. Let me go ahead. I got some notes here, so I'm cheating, but I don't want to kind of screw things up. But one thing, while we're in season, sticking to a pitch count and inning count, whatever you want to say, especially early season. Let's build up that tolerance first. That way, once you get to that, June, July, August, September, those timeframes, especially as you're lucky. I know that's more fall ball unless you're starting to play in the big leagues and that kind of stuff. But once you get towards the end of your season there, you have that tolerance built up. So you have the ability for that to kind of be the stepping stones that you have going forward. So kind of the main things, let's maintain or have a good ramp up period, whether it be we're doing a return to throw program, or we don't take it fully off, we still throw a little bit through the off season, and we slowly ramp up the intensity. Maintaining shoulder range of motion, muscle strength, that kind of stuff, especially as you start to get older and you're growing. We want to have that ramp up and that strength gain and the maintenance of those as you age and as you change, especially in those younger, we see boys kind of peak, that middle school, high school age, or end of middle school towards high school. So 13 to 17. We'll see. I don't have any specific numbers on that. But once you hit those growth spurts, we want to maintain that throwing and not do a ton of intensity while we're doing it. Just that way we're being safe, but we're still getting the mechanics good. So that's where the mechanics comes in, especially with our growing athletes. You want to maintain your mechanics, make sure it's good, make sure we're not overloading anything. So optimal mechanics is going to be key as you kind of progress through. Excuse me. So let's kind of go back through. We want to go ahead, early ramp up, maintain range of motion, proper mechanics, and stick to a pitch count early on in the season, inning count, whatever you want to say. You don't have to be super religious, but early on, stick to it and slowly build from there. That way, towards the end of the season, you're not overloading any of these things. So I know I threw a ton at you. If you have any questions, just reach out, put them in the comments, whatever you want to do. I've got more of those. Like I said, I'll link everything down below. But go ahead. This is kind of what we're looking at when it comes to what's going on with the UCL injuries. Why are we seeing them, and what can we do about them? See you guys later.